All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's an exciting time here for Aruba switching. As Partha mentioned, we had a launch a couple weeks ago with all about switching and how we're trying to change the business outcomes, as Partha talked about, with key trends. But what I'd like to do is actually double click into how we're actually bringing switching technology and really changing that network operator experience. So for those of you that are network engineers, network operations, what we believe are addressing a number of key trends and key pain points. And so if I can double click here, outside of what's happening with convergence in the network, whether it be IoT, mobility, or even this edge cloud era, what we consistently hear about from customers is this general notion of, I need to continue to do more with less. And so much of that is exasperated by the fact that whether it be the vendor community or just completely disparate operations, operating systems, having very siloed or vertical tool sets, it becomes very complicated to be able to streamline your network operational environment. Moreover, as this gentleman brought up, how do I get better insights, better kind of capabilities about understanding what's going on in my network? So most part, people are generally leveraging collectors, S-flow, NetFlow to get broader visibility into that environment. But what we would argue the opportunity is really to be able to get insights at the network device level. So being able to take kind of the confluence of multi-core processors, NVRAM, and being able to actually leverage a time series database where you can actually get data and insights right into the network switch. And we'll talk more about that in the sessions to come. And then more so, as Partha kind of talked about, this idea that the network is not keeping pace is a constant theme that we do hear about. Much of that has to do with the fact that, as IoT has become more and more prevalent in the environment, that increases the porosity of that network and security concerns. As you're getting more edge to cloud compute capabilities or edge computing, we're working with a lot of customers that actually have a number of racks in their edge environment where they're doing some pre-processing and need faster and higher performant networks. And so with that, we came out with a great extension to the CX portfolio. And there, I would say, kind of three major pillars that we're going to go into in much greater detail here today. The first is really around the cloud-native network operating system. And so it's not so much that it's cloud-native and where it's deployed. It's really going to be, how we develop the technology and the benefits that brings about. And so this is a journey that we did start a couple years ago, as Partha mentioned. We completely refactored our operating system, completely modernized as a microservices-based architecture with a stateful database as its single source of truth. So to that end, Scott will be talking much more detail about that and some of the key Vishwas is going to talk about that and some of the key benefits that brings about. And then next is really about distributed analytics. Again, as I kind of touched on, this idea that having network-wide visibility is by and large how people think about getting their insights into the network today, but more so being able to complement that with having distributed analytics becomes a very powerful complement to how you have the ability to isolate and get to a faster mean time to repair. And then lastly, just the ability to have purpose-built systems that you can right-size for every use case you can imagine. So as we think about the various places in the network, from the edge all the way out through to the data center, you want to make sure that you have not only a common operating system model, but the ability to take advantage of the right size, stackable or modular platform. And so, as I mentioned, CX is not new. Although we came out with a major launch with new systems, new software capabilities, new analytics and automation, CX, we started this journey, in fact, a couple years ago in the core of the network, in the data center environment, and it's today that we're really excited to share a number of extensions from that journey. But to that end, we're super thankful for the community, the network operators, and the engineers out there that have taken advantage of CX to date. We've been quite successful being able to build out some 80 cores data center environments every month as we go on here from today across a number of key verticals. Whether it be the financials, manufacturing, healthcare environments, this has been a strong testament that we've been able to progress forward with the CX architecture.
But you said those are network cores, so data center specifically or campus environments?
Both. Yeah. So the 8000 series today that have been available, they come in different form factors. I would say they're predominantly network aggregation core environments, but as well as the leaf and spine.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is actually a great segue as we think about how operators want to design their networks, especially in let's say the mid-market and many enterprises. They are looking for that common architecture, whether it be in the campus aggregation core, data center, or out through the IDF. And so, as I kind of started earlier, if you think about network architectures, some of it is segmented and partitioned by way of the feature set, by way of the systems and platforms. But I would argue or suggest that much of it is a bit artificial in the sense that vendors have kind of identified you need a certain architecture for, let's say the branch office, remote office, yet another architecture, let's say for the campus environment, and then perhaps even a third architecture for the data center environment. What we're trying to impart here today is more this idea that you should be able to leverage the CX approach, one common architecture, one operating system, really end to end. So that might seem like no big news, right? But in fact, this is a bit of the opportunity that has been escaping network operators for many, many years, tens of years, that has never come to truth, and it's one for which we think is going to be material in terms of, again, network designs, simplicity of a standard operating system and operating tool environment.
Let me ask a question here. Yeah. Do you believe that's true for hardware, software, or both?
All of the above.
Okay, because I would say the reason, or at least my understanding of the reason historically, is that there's been different hardware requirements in those different domains.
Yes.
The switching that's required for your branch office is different than what's required for your campus, which is different than what's required for your data center from a speeds, feeds, performance perspective. And there's a reason why it's been that way. I might completely agree with you on the software side. Yeah, a unified software experience is something everyone's been talking about. It's never really been achieved by anybody yet. So
I want to talk about that maybe in a slide or two.
Okay.
But I certainly agree with you from a scalability, whether it be in the branch office, you certainly don't need 10 gigabits to the desktop. You don't need 100 gig cores. And so that's certainly a very fair point. And so, here at Aruba, we want to make sure that you have the right economic and performance systems, if you will, that you can pick and choose and all under one common operating system. But we also believe that the architecture does matter, and the ASICs and the performance capabilities around how we can actually provide a better customer experience, it also matters. And that's the kind of point I want to touch on.
Okay.
And so the other kind of key point here at Aruba is really this idea that as you may have differentiated software and feature requirements, that you don't have to go through, kind of, let's say, design gymnastics around, what feature set do I need? Is it a layer 2 wiring closet, or perhaps I wanted a routed access IDF? In other words, you should be able to have one tier of software capabilities, effectively all you can eat, and not have to worry about forced subscriptions over multiple years of time. Many of our customers say, I have a network today. I don't know if I'm going to be able to kind of live with it as a life cycle of 3 to 5 years, but maybe even 7 to 10 years. And so not being forced into a subscription model becomes a key part of our go-to-market. And so here, what I wanted to talk about is, again, really this idea that we started with this journey with the 8000 series, focused in the core of the network, refreshing, very large-scale cores with the 8400, but also, let's say, kind of mid-tier aggregation environments with the 8320, 8325, which also double quite well for leaf and spine environments. And it's really the last couple of weeks we've been very excited about highlighting the new platforms, the 6300, which is our stackable product, primarily focused at that wiring closet IDF use case, and then the 6400, which comes in 2 flavors, a 5 and 10 slot chassis, that really have the opportunity to provide a highly scalable, high availability platform end to end. And so if I can talk again about why the architecture matters. And so we do build our own ASICs. We're on our Gen 7 set of ASICs that are going through and throughout all of these new platforms. And so although by and large, if you think about the campus, the traffic dynamic has historically been just north-south. And much of that, you don't really have to worry about east-west traffic. People have designed in oversubscription a fair amount in campus environments or even branch environments. But as Partha kind of talked about, we're seeing more and more of our customer base putting edge compute, putting storage in the edge. And much of that has to do with the fact that 75% of the data that many of the analysts speak about are being created in the places where we work, where we go to get healthcare, where we may go shop, where we might go watch a sports game. And some of that might be getting pre-processed at the edge. Much of that is going to a centralized data center. But the point is that being able to architect the network where you have the ability to have a highly performant capability so that you can connect, but also protect. And so this is much of what we talk about with our dynamic segmentation capability, being able to abstract users' devices by way of identity and being able to have an architecture that can actually be future-proof, but while also protecting you day one. And so these are some key capabilities that we've integrated into our ASICs. Another one is just quite mechanically is this idea of having a VOQ architecture or pipeline. And so VOQ is certainly nothing new from the data center perspective, but a capability that we have brought into our campus fabrics, simply to allow for better predictability of the traffic flows in the east-west environments. I see a question.
But why build your own ASIC? Because you could go to Broadcom and bring something to market much faster.
I would argue that we couldn't. Not certainly at the cost and the design flexibility and the future-proofing that we want. And so, which is a great segue to my next slide, and let me just touch on that in just half a minute here. So anyways, we did come out with an end-to-end capability of our own ASICs, and with that question, I do want to touch on some of the systems here. And so, what we did do is come out with a whole suite of systems that really allow our network architecture and engineers to purposely design, for their particular use case, whether it be at the very low end, very economical, kind of simplistic stackable switch, all the way up to the very high end chassis. So one of the things in our industry that has become a bit troublesome for operators is this idea of, is my system future-proof? Today I might need only 1 gig, 10 gig uplinks as an example. But what about 25 gig? It's becoming quite prevalent. In fact, the cost of 25 gig is effectively at parity with 10 gig. Today, if you want to go to 25 gig or even 50 gig, so all of our high-speed ports provide 1, 10, 25, 50 gig right out of the box. Today, if you want to take advantage of 25 or 50 gig, it requires a truck roll. You have to actually pull out a module, insert a new module. That is all possible today because we built our own ASICs. The other kind of key benefit, which is actually not available in merchant silicon, by the way.
Yeah, you're running multi-speed gearboxes in the ASICs.
That's
and the
exactly.
right?
You know about the gearbox solution. So the other kind of key benefit of this is that if you want a high-speed uplink, you have to use a 40 gig, which is actually hashed across 4 fiber pair. We've actually built in 25, 50 gig SerDes right into our ASIC, highly performant. This is the benefit of working with HPE Aruba. It might not be today's problem, but we do work with many customers, perhaps at the higher end of the enterprise, that do have these challenges. And so in any case, this is kind of one of the reasons that we do build our own ASICs. But ultimately, kind of getting back to the platforms, the 6400 really is the Swiss Army knife of the enterprise. Highly scalable ability to build out a wiring closet if you need to get to hundreds, even 480 ports of 1 gig, or even multi-gig, 1, 2.5, 5 gig, if you wanted, up to the 10th slot. Not saying that's the prevalent use case today, but more so that same platform can also be used for core and aggregation, or even dual homed host in the data center. So you can use it as an end of row, middle row. Think of it as a class in a box. Yeah,
I just want to ask a similar question to the one I asked in the first session. I've sort of generally taken on an anti-chassis stance. I don't think they're relevant going forward. because I think the ECMP designs that we've seen, because that's fundamentally an ECMP
Yeah.
in a box.
Yeah.
Do you think customers should be buying 1RU, or let's talk around the topic of buying 1RU boxes and building your own ECMP versus buying a chassis? Is it really that difficult? Are customers really that incompetent that they can't run a handful of switches themselves?
So I wouldn't go so far as kind of suggesting or pushing one architecture over the other.
Yeah.
To me, it's quite religious. You know, you can build out highly scalable leaf-spine networks using a common 1RU configuration, and it's been done at scale highly effectively. I would argue that the chassis does offer up some additional operational benefits, one of which, you know, if you think about building out very large, 16-way, 32-way ECMP networks, the cable plant is a nightmare. Now, a lot of people leverage automation, cookie cutter configurations to help obviate that. But in certain environments, you know, where you don't have, you know, let's say highly skilled operators, you know, being able to operate, a chassis really eliminates all that cable plant because you have the leaf and spine in one fabric. Moreover, there is some argument about the high availability because you can actually dual host, have redundant end-of-row switches, and actually get live upgrades, live maintenance capability. So there are some benefits, but at the end of the day, it's the customer's choice.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and so just going on here, we do have the sister platform here, the stackables, really, again, purpose-built for all the different, let's say, edge use cases. You know, there's actually wanted to touch on the 8320, 8225. So this is actually our leaf and spine configurations that are available from a 1025 gig host connectivity all the way out through 40 to 100 gig spine solutions. With that, these are the same platforms that are often used in campus aggregation solutions, highly performant, while also coupled with our VSX live upgrade capability to be used in a matched node environment.
You said live upgrade capability, and I died a little inside. I want to believe, but usually the ISSU or whatever the upgrade process is notorious for failing or causing problems, et cetera.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Can you defend the live upgrade?
Yeah, and it gives a lot of customers angst and concern. So I guess seeing is believing. That's the first thing, and something that perhaps we could follow up with demos. We have hundreds of customers that actually demonstrate this quite regularly, and perhaps it's one that Vishwas will touch on in a bit more detail because by design, it really has to do with the fact that ISSU and other VSS solutions, the inherent problem was state machines.
Yes.
We've completely eliminated the notion of a state machine by way of a stateful database. And this is the modern approach to network operating systems, one Vishwas is going to touch on.
Okay.
Anyways, it's a very fair concern, one that's plagued our industry for many, many years.
I was going to say, you said we're going to talk about that later.
Yes.
Okay, because that's
the next
an
session.
important part.
Yep, absolutely. So let me just kind of round out the platforms discussion here. So the 6300 is our stackable products. You can actually see them here. Although you can't see the back of them, there are actually two subfamilies, if you will. We have a set of 4 configurations, 1 gig PoE, non-PoE, 24 and 48 port that does provide PoE plus and 60 watt capabilities. The key here is that these are very elegant designs in the sense that the power supply and cooling are all completely integrated into a fixed chassis for very kind of, let's say, economic branch office use cases. And then we have a suite of products that are fully modular, redundant power and cooling that come in all the different configurations that you can imagine, from 1 gig to SmartRate, 30 watt, 60 watt PoE, as well as a 24 port SFP plus configuration, with all the flexibility that you can actually manage them in one single VSF logical stack, mixing and matching both the IDF and MDF configuration into a converged stack environment.
On the Wi-Fi 6, is there anything beyond the PoE and multi-gig probably that we need to know about for these switches?
Yes, yeah. So many of the environments that we're working with are going down this path of smart buildings, smart locks, and we've introduced some new capabilities around persistent or always on PoE. And actually, Vishwas is going to touch on that a bit more. So trying to focus a bit around kind of the high-level architecture and the systems, but the very important question.